What if I told you the mundane 7-Eleven night shift isn't just about stocking shelves and making coffee? It's a delicate dance with the unknown, governed by a terrifying set of unspoken rules. We're talking about protocols so bizarre, so chilling, they'll make you rethink your next Slurpee run. Are you brave enough to learn why acknowledging the tapping from the storage closet after midnight could be the last mistake you ever make? I never thought I would end up here, standing under the buzzing torch of fluorescent lights at 3 in the morning, staring out into the pitch-black void of the Nevada desert. When you hit rock bottom, you don't get to be picky about the ladder you climb back up. For me, that ladder was a minimum wage graveyard shift at a convenience store located at a mile marker that most GPS systems seem to forget existed. The manager, a sweaty, nervous man named Mr. Henderson, hired me on the spot. He didn't ask for a resume. He didn't ask for references. He just looked at my pulse, checked that I wasn't currently hallucinating, and handed me a polyester vest that smelled faintly of stale tobacco and fear. He mumbled something about high turnover before retreating to his office and locking the door. That should have been the first red flag. The second was the sheer isolation. This was a neighborhood spot where teenagers loitered or cops stopped for donuts. This was a lone outpost of commerce in a sea of sagebrush and sand. The highway outside was a ribbon of asphalt that stretched into nothingness, occasionally illuminated by the headlights of a long-haul trucker pushing through the night. But mostly it was just the wind. The wind out here creates a sound that mimics human voices if you listen too long. It howls through the cracks in the automatic doors, whispering things you don't want to hear. My first night started normally enough. I spent the first hour orienting myself with the layout. It was your standard corporate footprint. Rows of colorful candy wrappers, the glint of glass refrigeration units, the mesmerizing swirl of the Slurpee machines churning neon sludge. I wiped down the counters. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee that I knew no one would drink. I tried to convince myself that this was just a job, just a boring, mind-numbing job to pay off debts that were slowly drowning me. But the air in the store felt heavy, pressurized, like the inside of a submarine diving too deep. Around 1 a.m., I found a list. It wasn't in the employee handbook. It wasn't posted on the bulletin board next to the labor law posters. It was taped to the underside of the cash register drawer, written on the back of a greasy receipt in frantic, jagged handwriting. The ink was smeared in places, as if the person writing it had been shaking uncontrollably. At the top, in bold, double-underlined letters, it read, "The Survival Protocols." I chuckled at first. I thought it was a prank, a hazing ritual left by the last guy to spook the new blood. I pulled the tape loose and smoothed the paper out on the counter. There were only 3 rules, but the specificity of them sent a cold prickle down the back of my neck. Rule number 1, the ice machine must never stop running. If the hum ceases, restart it immediately. Use the manual crank in the back if the power fails. Do not let the silence settle. Rule number 2, never look directly at the shadow in aisle 3. You will see it in your peripheral vision near the beef jerky. It is tall. It is watching. If you look at it, it will know you can see it. Just keep stocking. Rule number 3, under no circumstances acknowledge the tapping from the storage closet after midnight. Do not speak to it. Do not knock back. Do not open the door. I read the list twice, then a third time. Okay, I whispered to the empty store. Very funny, guys. I crumbled the receipt and tossed it into the trash bin beneath the counter. I was a rational man. I didn't believe in ghosts, ghouls, or haunted convenience stores. I believed in late fees, eviction notices, and the headache currently forming behind my eyes. I turned my attention to the stack of inventory sheets Henderson had left me. But as the digital clock on the wall ticked toward 2 a.m., the atmosphere in the store began to shift. It wasn't something I could see. Not yet. It was a feeling, a drop in temperature that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The buzzing of the overhead lights seemed to change pitch, becoming a high-frequency whine that drilled into my teeth. I was restocking the energy drinks in the cooler, enjoying the blast of cold air, when I heard it, a rhythmic, metallic thump-thump-thump. I froze, a can of Monster Energy halfway to the shelf. The sound was coming from the back of the store, near the slushy station. My mind instantly flashed to the crumbled note in the trash. Rule number 1, the ice machine must never stop running. I stepped out of the cooler. The glass door ceiling shut behind me with a suction whoosh. The store was dead silent. Too silent. The usual hum of the refrigeration units seemed dampened, muffled by an unseen blanket. And there, standing like a silver monolith against the back wall, was the industrial ice maker. The icy light was flickering erratically. The machine gave a wet, grinding cough, and then silence. The steady, reassuring hum that had been present since I arrived cut out completely. A sudden, irrational panic seized my chest. It was just a machine. Machines break. Motors overheat. But the silence that followed wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the presence of something else. The shadows in the corners of the store seemed to stretch, reaching out like spilled ink. The air grew stagnant and tasted of ozone and old copper. Stupid piece of junk. I muttered, my voice sounding too loud in the oppressive quiet. I walked toward the machine, my footsteps squeaking on the linoleum. I remembered the note. Restart immediately. I reached for the power switch on the side of the unit. It was toggled to on. I flipped it off, waited a heartbeat, and flipped it back on. Nothing, not even a sputter. The silence deepened. I could feel eyes on me, not the security cameras. Something else, something primal. The hairs on my arms stood up, sensing static electricity that shouldn't be there. I remembered the second part of the rule. Use the manual crank in the back. You have got to be kidding me. I hissed. I had to pull the heavy machine away from the wall to access the rear panel. It scraped against the floor, a screeching sound that made me wince. I squeezed into the narrow gap between the machine and the wall, a space filled with dust bunnies and discarded wrappers. It was dark back there, the fluorescent light from the store blocked by the bulk of the unit. I fumbled around until my fingers brushed against the cold, rusted metal handle protruding from the motor housing. I gripped it and turned. It resisted, stiff with age and neglect. I put my shoulder into it, grunting with effort. 1 turn. A gear clicked. 2 turns. The machine gave a low groan. 3 turns. Suddenly, the motor roared to life. The compressor kicked in with a violent shudder that vibrated through my bones. The familiar, steady hum returned, filling the store and pushing back the suffocating silence. I scrambled out from behind the machine, gasping for breath as if I had just surfaced from underwater. I leaned against the counter, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked around the store. The shadows had retreated. The air felt lighter, breathable again. I laughed, a shaky, hollow sound. Coincidence, I told myself. Just a coincidence. Old wiring. That's all. But as I walked back toward the front counter to grab a bottle of water, my gaze inadvertently drifted toward the center of the store, toward aisle 3, the aisle with the chips and the beef jerky. I didn't look directly at it. I remembered the warning just in time. But out of the corner of my eye, in that blurry, unreliable peripheral vision, I saw it. A shape. It was tall, impossibly tall, the top of it brushing the ceiling tiles. It was thin and darker than the surrounding air, standing perfectly still in the middle of the aisle. My blood ran cold. I kept my eyes locked forward, staring rigidly at the lottery ticket display on the counter. Don't look at it. If you look at it, it will know. I forced my legs to move, to carry me behind the safety of the plexiglass barrier at the register. I grabbed the inventory clipboard and pretended to write, my hand trembling so hard the pen tore through the paper. I didn't dare look up. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at the numbers on the page, listening to the hum of the ice machine. It was my lifeline, my anchor. As long as that machine was running, I felt a sliver of safety, but the night was young. It was only 2:45 a.m. And then, from the far corner of the store, past the coolers in the restroom, came a sound that stopped my heart. Tap, tap, tap. It was light, polite, and rhythmic. It was the sound of a knuckle rapping against hollow wood. I stopped breathing. The sound came again, slightly louder this time, demanding attention. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the storage closet. The door I had locked myself at the start of the shift. The door that led to a room filled with nothing but extra cups, napkins, and cleaning supplies. There was no one in there. There couldn't be. Rule number 3. Under no circumstances, acknowledge the tapping. I gripped the counter, my knuckles turning white. The tapping continued, evolving into a pattern. It sounded intelligent. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the building settling. It was a request for entry. Ignore it, Elias. I whispered, squeezing my eyes shut. Just ignore it. But the night had other plans. The radio, which had been playing a low-volume classic rock station, suddenly cut to static. Through the white noise, a voice emerged. It wasn't the DJ. It was a distorted, guttural whisper that seemed to emanate from the speakers, the walls, and the very air itself. Elias. It hissed. My eyes snapped open. The store lights flickered violently, plunging the aisles into momentary darkness before buzzing back to life. In that split second of darkness, the tapping from the closet turned into a slam, a violent impact that shook the door frame. I was alone in the desert, miles from help, trapped in a glass box with things that defied logic. The list in the trash wasn't a prank. It was a manual, a warning from someone who had survived what I was just beginning to endure. I retrieved the crumbled receipt from the bin, smoothing it out with trembling fingers. I needed to memorize it. I needed to understand. Because the silence was trying to return, the shadow in aisle 3 had moved closer to the front, and the thing in the closet knew my name. This wasn't just a job. This was a siege. And I had 5 more hours until sunrise. I grabbed the store phone to call Henderson, to scream, to quit, to do anything. But when I lifted the receiver, there was no dial tone, just the sound of wind howling across the desert and faint, distant laughter that sounded exactly like my own. I looked at the security monitor. The screen showed the feed from camera 4, pointed directly at the storage closet door. On the screen, the door was bulging outward, as if something massive was pressing against it from the inside, testing the hinges. Okay, I said, my voice trembling. Okay, we play by the rules. The tapping from the storage closet eventually ceased, fading away like a dying heartbeat, but the silence it left behind was far worse. It was a heavy, expectant silence, the kind that hangs in the air right before a thunderstorm breaks. I stood behind the counter, my grip on the mop handle so tight my fingers had gone numb. The digital clock flickered to 3:03 a.m., the witching hour. In the movies, this is when the ghosts come out to play. In my reality, halfway between Reno and nowhere, it was when the rules stopped being suggestions and started becoming laws of survival. I forced myself to breathe, in through the nose, out through the mouth. The immediate panic began to ebb, replaced by a cold, calculating dread. I had to treat this like a logic puzzle. If the note was real, and the slamming door and the erratic electronics certainly suggested it was, then adherence to the protocols was my only shield. I looked at the crumpled receipt again, smoothing the creases with a trembling thumb. Rule number 1. The ice machine must never stop running. It was humming now, a steady, rhythmic drone that vibrated through floorboards. I realized then that I hadn't just restarted a motor. I had re-engaged a barrier. The sound wasn't just white noise. It was a frequency, a sonic wall designed to keep something out. Or perhaps keep something in. I walked over to the Slurpee station, pretending to wipe down the sticky residue of spilled cherry red syrup. But my true purpose was to inspect the ice machine. It was an ancient beast, a towering box of stainless steel that looked like it had been salvaged from a decommissioned battleship. As I wiped the counter, I noticed something disturbing. The vibration of the machine was causing the cups in the dispenser to rotate slowly, turning counterclockwise. It was hypnotic. I placed my hand on the cold metal flank of the unit. It felt like it was feverish, the metal hot to the touch despite the ice inside. I could hear the gears grinding, a sound like teeth chewing on gravel. Keep running. I whispered to it, feeling foolish but desperate. Just keep running. Then, the bell above the front door chimed. I jumped, nearly knocking over a display of beef jerky. I spun around, half expecting a monster, but it was just a man. He was older, weather-beaten, wearing a trucker hat that had lost its logo years ago and a denim jacket stained with grease. He looked like part of the landscape, eroded by wind and sand. He didn't look at me. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait, his boots thudding on the linoleum. "Help you with something?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. The man didn't answer immediately. He walked to the coffee station, poured a cup of the black sludge I had brewed hours ago, and stared into it. Then he turned his head slowly. His eyes were milky, obscured by cataracts, yet he looked directly at me with piercing intensity. "Ice machine sounded like it died a while back," he rasped. His voice sounded like tires crunching on gravel. "You got it running again." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said, stepping closer to the register. "Just a glitch. Old wiring." The man took a sip of the scalding coffee, without flinching. "Ain't no glitches out here, son. Just lapses in attention." He walked toward the counter, placing a $5 bill on the surface. He didn't buy anything else. "Just the coffee. You keep that machine loud. The silence is when they get hungry." He turned to leave, but then he paused. He was standing near the entrance of aisle 3, the aisle I had been strictly avoiding, the aisle where the tall shadow lived. "Don't go down there." I blurted out, the warning leaving my lips before I could stop it. The old man froze. He didn't look down the aisle. He didn't even turn his head toward it. He just nodded, a grim, knowing gesture. "I know better than to walk in a dead man's shadow," he muttered. "You keep your eyes front, kid. Peripheral vision is a liar. It shows you things your brain ain't meant to process." With that, he pushed through the doors and vanished into the night. No car engine started. No headlights swept across the lot. He was just gone, swallowed by the dark. I was alone again, but the interaction had confirmed my worst fears. The locals, the real locals, knew. The rules weren't just for the employees. They were for anyone foolish enough to step into this domain. I retreated to the safety of the counter, my eyes glued to the security monitors. That's when the real test began. I had been so focused on the ice machine and the closet that I had momentarily neglected rule number 2, the aisle 3 anomaly. Aisle 3 contained the salty snacks, chips, pretzels, nuts, and jerky. It sat directly in the center of the store, visible from almost every angle. The rule stated, never look directly at the shadow. You will see it in your peripheral vision. Just keep stocking. The problem with being told not to look at something is that it becomes the only thing you want to look at. It's the call of the void. My eyes kept drifting, drawn by a magnetic pull toward that center aisle. I forced myself to stare at the cigarette rack behind me. counting the packs of Marlboros. 1, 2, 3, but I could see it. In the corner of my right eye, a shape had manifested. It wasn't the nebulous blur I had seen earlier. It was sharper now. It stood right in front of the Doritos. It was tall, impossibly elongated, like a person who had been stretched on a rack. Its limbs hung low. The fingers, if you could call them that, brushing the floor. It was motionless, yet I got the distinct impression it was vibrating, shivering with potential kinetic energy. I grabbed a stack of magazines and began organizing them, forcefully shoving them into the rack to make noise, to distract myself. Don't look, don't look, don't look. A bag of chips popped. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet store. I flinched, my head jerking automatically toward the source of the noise. I caught myself just in time, snapping my neck back so hard it cracked. My heart hammered against my ribs. A bag of Lay's potato chips had burst open in aisle 3, scattering chips across the floor. "It's bait," I whispered, sweat beading on my forehead. "It's trying to make me look." I stayed behind the counter. I wasn't going to clean it up, let the ants have it, let the store rot. I wasn't walking down there. But the anomaly wasn't finished. From the periphery of my vision, I saw the shadow move. It didn't walk. It glided, a fluid motion like oil on water. It shifted from the chips to the jerky. Then it moved closer to the front of the aisle, closer to me. The air around aisle 3 began to shimmer, like heat haze on a tarmac. The fluorescent lights directly above that aisle started to dim, casting the shelves into a sickly yellow twilight. I could feel the pressure building in my ears, a low-frequency thrumming that wasn't coming from the ice machine. It was coming from the shadow. It was a psychic weight, a demand to be acknowledged. "Look at me." The air seemed to whisper, "I am right here. Just one glance." I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the counter until my knuckles turned white. "No," I said aloud. "I have inventory to do." I grabbed a clipboard and blindly marched to the opposite side of the store, toward the refrigerated section with the milk and eggs. This was aisle 1, safe territory. Or so I hoped. I opened the dairy cooler, letting the cold air blast my flushed face. I needed to calm down. I needed to anchor myself in reality. I started counting cartons of milk. Whole, 2% skim. I was doing fine. I was surviving. Then I made a mistake. A fatal rookie mistake. I closed the glass door of the milk cooler. The glass was reflective, backed by the darkness of the store behind me. And in the reflection of the glass door, I saw it clearly. I wasn't looking directly at it. Technically, I was looking at a reflection, but the distinction didn't seem to matter to the thing in aisle 3. In the reflection, the shadow was standing right behind me. It wasn't in aisle 3 anymore. It was inches from my back. I froze, the breath trapped in my throat. In the reflection, I could see details I wished I hadn't. It wore a tattered uniform, something that looked disturbingly like the 7-Eleven vest I was wearing, but gray and rotting. Its face was a smooth, featureless oval of pale skin, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. Yet I could feel it smiling. It loomed over my shoulder, its elongated fingers hovering just above my neck. I didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to spin and fight, to scream. But the rule echoed in my mind. If you look at it, it will know you can see it. It knew I saw the reflection. Does that count? Oh, God, does that count? I stared into reflection, locking eyes with the eyeless void of its face. It tilted its head, a jerky, bird-like motion. Then, slowly, one of its long, gray fingers extended and touched the glass of the cooler door, pointing directly at my reflected heart. The glass began to frost over at the point of contact. A web of ice spread rapidly outward, cracking the glass with a sharp snap. The sound broke the spell. I dropped the clipboard and scrambled backward, crashing into a display of donuts. I didn't turn around to look at the space behind me. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, staring at the scuff marks on the tiles. I didn't look at you. I yelled at the floor, my voice bordering on hysteria. I looked at the glass. The rule says direct eye contact. That wasn't direct. I was arguing semantics with a demon in a convenience store. This was insanity. But the presence behind me receded. The intense cold that had radiated from my back lifted slightly. I risked a glance upward, keeping my gaze low. The reflection in the cooler door was clear. Just me, looking pale and terrified, surrounded by donuts. The shadow was gone. Or rather, it had returned to its station. I could see in my peripheral vision again, back in aisle 3, standing guard over the beef jerky. It was waiting. It was testing my boundaries, seeing how easily I would break. I scrambled back to the counter, my legs feeling like jelly. I checked the time. 3:45 a.m. Only 45 minutes had passed since the ice machine incident. The night was stretching, time dilating a way that felt malicious. I needed a distraction. I needed noise. I turned up the volume on the store's radio system, hoping for a pop song, a commercial, anything. But the static was back. And through the static, I heard the tapping again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from the closet this time. My blood turned to ice. I slowly rotated my head. The sound was coming from the window, the big plate glass window at the front of the store that looked out onto the dark highway. I looked. There was nothing there, just a reflection of the store interior in the vast, consuming darkness beyond. Tap, tap, tap. I stepped closer, squinting, and then I saw them. Handprints. Dozens of them. Small, greasy handprints were appearing on the outside of the glass, starting from the bottom and walking their way up, as if an invisible horde of children were clamoring to get in. But there was no one outside. The lot was empty. The prints were manifesting out of nothing, accompanied by the wet, rhythmic sound of palms slapping against the glass. I backed away, retreating until my back hit the Slurpee machine. The ice machine hung behind me, a comforting vibration against my spine. Rule number 1, keep the machine running. It was the only thing keeping the barriers up. Okay, I panted. Okay, new rule, don't look at the windows. I was running out of places to look. I couldn't look at aisle 3. I couldn't look at the closet. Now I couldn't look at the front windows. My world was shrinking, closing in on me. I was trapped in a cage of visual hazards. I decided to focus on the counter, the safe, boring counter. I started cleaning it again, scrubbing the same spot until the laminate began to wear. That's when the phone rang. The landline phone, the one that had been dead an hour ago. It rang with a shrill, mechanical warble that pierced the air. I stared at it. The caller ID display was cracked, but I could make out the letters. Internal call. My hand hovered over the receiver. Who could be calling internally? There was only one extension. This one. I shouldn't answer it. Every horror movie trope in the book screamed, don't answer it. But what if it was Henderson? What if it was help? What if it was the old man, Silas, trying to warn me about something else? I picked up the receiver and held it slowly to my ear. 7-Eleven, this is Elias. I said, my voice barely a whisper. For a moment, there was only static. Then a voice spoke. It was my voice, not a recording. It was me, speaking in real time, but the tone was flat, emotionless, devoid of humanity. You missed the spot, the voice on the phone said. I dropped the phone. As it clattered to the counter, I looked down at the spot I had been scrubbing, written in the cleaning fluid. Etched into grime I had been trying to remove were words. They hadn't been there a second ago. I had been scrubbing them into existence. The ice is melting. I spun around to the ice machine. The hum was still there, but it sounded wet now, gurgling. I looked at the icy indicator light. It had turned from green to a pulsing, angry red. Water was beginning to pool at the base of the machine, dark and murky, spreading across the floor like blood. The hum was failing. The barrier was failing. And from aisle 3, the shadow stepped out into the main walkway. It wasn't in my peripheral vision anymore. It was standing directly in front of the register, fully visible, defying the rules it had set. It turns out the rules can change. And they just did. The red light on the ice machine pulsed like an infected wound. The hum, my sonic shield, was sputtering, choked by the sound of gurgling water. And there, standing in the main walkway, was the thing from aisle 3. It had broken its containment. It stood 7 feet tall, a silhouette cut from the fabric of a nightmare. Its featureless face turned toward me. I didn't think. I reacted. I vaulted over the counter, my shoes slipping on the spreading puddle of dark water leaking from the ice machine. I needed tools. I needed options. The shadow creature took a step forward, its movement jerky and disjointed, like a stop-motion animation missing frames. Fix the machine, I screamed at myself. Fix the machine. I scrambled to the back of the massive steel unit, splashing through the icy water. The manual crank. I grabbed it again, my hands slick with sweat and grime. I hauled on it with every ounce of strength I had left. Grind. Crunch. Whir. The motor coughed, spitting a cloud of black smoke that smelled like burning hair. The shadow was closer now. I could feel the temperature dropping rapidly, my breath pluming in the air. Frost began to creep up the legs of the shelving units. Come on, I roared, throwing my weight against crank. With a deafening clank, something inside the machine snapped back into place. The gurgling stopped. The red light flickered and snapped back to a steady green. The hum returned, loud, aggressive, and beautiful. I collapsed against the wall, gasping. I looked toward the walkway. The shadow was gone, forced back to the periphery. The rules were reestablished. For now. But the night wasn't done with me. As the adrenaline faded, leaving me shaking and nauseous, a new sound emerged from the silence. Tap, tap, tap. It was a closet again. But this time, it wasn't just a polite knock. It was accompanied by a voice. A soft, melodious humming. It sounded like a lullaby, distorted by distance and decay. Rule number 3. Under no circumstances acknowledge the tapping from the storage closet after midnight. Do not speak to it. Do not knock back. Do not open the door. I crawled out from behind the ice machine and stood up, my pants soaked with freezing water. The sound was definitely coming from the locked door, labeled Employees Only. Hello? A voice called out from behind the door. I froze. It was a woman's voice. Young, terrified, and painfully human. Please, the voice sobbed. Is anyone out there? I'm trapped. It's dark in here. Please let me out. My heart wrenched. It sounded so real, so desperate. My hand twitched toward my keys. What if someone had gotten locked in there during the day shift? Henderson was negligent enough to miss something like that. What if I was leaving an innocent girl to rot in the dark? I can hear you breathing, the girl said, her voice trembling. I know you're there. Please. The handle is jammed. Just turn it from the outside. I took a step forward. I had to help her. It was basic human decency. Stop, my brain screamed. Remember the list. I looked at the crumpled receipt on the counter. Under no circumstances. I can't. I whispered, barely audible. Why not? The voice shifted instantly. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp curiosity. Why can't you, Elias? It knew my name. I backed away, retreating to the center of the store, trying to put as much distance between me and that door as possible. "You're not real," I said, more to convince myself than the entity. "I am as real as you are," the voice cooed. "Maybe realer. You're just a temp, Elias, a disposable battery for the machine. Open the door. Let me show you what the night shift is really for." Then the tapping changed. It became a scratching. Slow, deliberate scratches, like nails dragging down a chalkboard. Scree, scree. I cover my ears. "Go away," I shouted. Big mistake. The moment I acknowledged it directly, the moment I spoke to the door, the atmosphere in the store decompressed with a violent pop. My ears popped painfully. The lights turned a sickly shade of violet. The door to the storage closet didn't open. Instead, it began to dissolve. Though it didn't burn or rot, it simply faded, turning translucent like mist. Through the ghostly outline of the door, I could see into the closet. It wasn't a closet. The space behind the door frame didn't contain shelves of napkins or cleaning supplies. It opened into a vast, descending stone staircase that spiraled down into an infinite abyss. The walls of the stairwell were lined with things, items. I squinted, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. There were rows of alarm clocks, all flashing 12 o'clock. There were piles of lost car keys. There were stacks of missing persons posters. And standing on the top step, looking out at me through the fading door, was not a girl. It was a mimic, a creature that looked like a rough sketch of a human being, made of scribbled charcoal lines. It had the girl's voice, but it held it in its hand like a tape recorder. "You spoke to me," the charcoal thing said, its mouth not moving. The voice came from the object in its hand. That's an invitation. The translucent door vanished completely. The barrier was down. The creature stepped over the threshold and into the store. As its foot touched the linoleum, the floor tiles turned gray and brittle, cracking under its weight. I was backing up, knocking over displays of gum and batteries. I was cornered. The ice machine was running. But this wasn't a failure of the machine. This was a failure of the operator. I had broken Rule 3. The creature didn't rush. It moved with a terrifying grace, drifting toward me. "We have so much inventory to process. Elias, down below. We need a clerk." I was backed against the front counter. I had nowhere to go. The creature raised a limb that ended in sharp, jagged points. I needed a weapon. I needed a miracle. My hand brushed against something on the counter. The pricing gun. Useless. Then my fingers touched something else. A small, unassuming cardboard box that Henderson had left out. Salt packets. It was an urban legend, a cliché. Salt repels evil. But clichés become clichés for a reason, right? And I was in a 7-Eleven fighting a charcoal demon. Logic had left the building hours ago. I grabbed a handful of salt packets, tore them open with my teeth, and hurled the white crystals at the creature. The salt hit the charcoal form and sizzled. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal. Where the salt touched, the charcoal lines broke apart, dissolving into black smoke. It recoiled, stumbling back toward the open voided closet. "It works!" I yelled, hysterical laughter bubbling up in my throat. Condiments. The weakness is condiments. I grabbed the entire box of salt. I ripped it open and began spraying salt like I was exorcising a demon with fire hose. "Back! Get back!" The creature screeched, shielding its non-face with its arms. It retreated, step by agonizing step, back toward the threshold of the closet. "You are delaying the inevitable." The girl's voice screamed from the recorder in its hand. "The shift never ends. It ends at 7 a.m. I screamed back, throwing a handful of salt directly into its chest. The creature howled and fell backward, tumbling down the stone stairs into the abyss. As soon as it crossed the threshold, the reality of the store snapped back. The stone staircase vanished. The wooden door materialized out of thin air and slammed shut with a thunderous boom. The lock clicked. I stood there, panting, clutching an empty box of salt, surrounded by white granules on the floor. The closet was just a closet again. I slumped to the floor, my back against the counter. I checked the time. 4:15 a.m. I had survived the ice machine. I had survived the closet. But as I sat there, trying to slow my heart rate, I realized I had neglected the store itself. While I was fighting the mimic, the store had been changing. I looked up at the shelves. The candy bars weren't Snickers or Milky Ways anymore. The wrappers were different colors. Colors that hurt my eyes to look at. The names were in a language I didn't recognize, composed of geometric shapes and guttural symbols. I picked up a bag of what should have been Doritos. The bag felt warm, fleshy. The text read, "Crunchy fingers, spicy bone marrow flavor." I dropped it in horror. I looked at the Slurpee machine. The neon blue and red sludge was gone. The tanks were filled with a thick black liquid that pulsed with a slow heartbeat. The sign above it read, "Void Nectar." I ran to the magazine rack. The faces on the covers weren't celebrities. They were people screaming. The headlines were dates of future tragedies. The store shifted. I whispered. I broke the rule, and the store shifted into their dimension. I was still in the 7-Eleven, but it wasn't the one in Nevada. Not anymore. I was the night clerk in a convenience store located in hell. And then the front door slid open. I scrambled up, grabbing the mop handle again, preparing for another monster. But it wasn't a monster. It was a woman. She was dressed in a business suit, looking incredibly out of place. She held a briefcase. She walked in, her heels clicking on the floor, seemingly oblivious to the flesh bag chips and the void slushies. She walked up to the counter and placed a bottle of water on it. The water was clear, normal. "Just this, please," she said. She didn't look at me. She looked through me. I stared at her. "Did you see the chips?" I stammered. She looked at the rack of crunchy fingers. She frowned. "Doritos?" "Yes." "What about them?" She saw Doritos. I saw severed fingers. I realized with a sinking dread what was happening. My perception had been altered. Or maybe hers was the illusion. "That'll be $2, I said, my voice hollow. She handed me a bill. I looked at it. It wasn't George Washington. It was a portrait of the charcoal creature I had just fought. I took the money. I put it in the register. I gave her change, normal quarters. "Have a nice night," she said and walked out. As the doors closed behind her, I looked at the bill in the drawer. It shimmered and turned back into a normal dollar bill. I was hallucinating, or I was being gaslit by the universe. I needed to stabilize the environment. I needed to anchor the store back to earth. I remembered something the old man, Silas, had said. Inventory beyond the barcode. There was a logbook under the counter. A real one, bound in leather, not the corporate binder. I pulled it out. It was filled with entries from previous night shifters. Entry, March 12, 1998. The shells are turning. Recite the Pledge of Allegiance backward to reset the geometry. Entry, November 4th, 2005. If the Slurpee machine bleeds, add lime juice. The acidity neutralizes the ectoplasm. Entry, July 8th, 2019. If you see the products change, you are drifting. Eat something from the store. You must consume the reality you want to be in. I stared at the last entry. Eat something. I looked at the bag of crunchy fingers. If I ate that, and it was actually a human finger, I would vomit. If I didn't eat it, and I drifted further, I might never leave. I had to find something that looked safe. I scanned the aisles. Everything was twisted. Screaming gummies. Eyeball pops. Then I saw it, in the back of the cooler, hidden behind the black milk. A single, dusty can of Diet Coke. It looked normal. The logo was correct. The red and silver can shone like a beacon of sanity. I ran to the cooler. I grabbed the can. It was cold, real cold. I popped the tab. Pissed. The sound of carbonation. The sound of America. I took a sip. It tasted like aspartame and aluminum. It tasted like home. I chugged the entire can. As the liquid hit my stomach, a wave of nausea rolled over me, followed by a sensation of falling. The world spun. The colors blurred. When my vision cleared, I was on my knees in front of the cooler. I looked at the chips. Doritos. I looked at the Slurpee machine. Blue raspberry. I looked at the magazines. People magazine. I laughed. I laughed until I cried. I was back. But the night demands balance. You don't get to escape one trap without stepping into another. As I stood up, wiping tears from my eyes, I heard a sound in the break room in the back. Not the closet. The break room. The room where the safe was. It was the sound of the safe keypad beeping. Beep, beep, beep. Someone was trying the combination. I was the only one with the combination. I walked slowly toward the back, clutching my empty Diet Coke, like a talisman. I peeked around the corner. Standing at the safe was a man. He was wearing a 7-Eleven uniform. He had his back to me. He was typing in the code. He turned around. It was me, not a shadow, not a charcoal sketch. It was me, flesh and blood. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. He was holding a mop. He looked at me, his eyes widening in horror. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I'm Elias," I said. "No," the other me said, raising his mop. "I'm Elias, and the rules say if you see your double, kill it before it takes your shift." He charged. The mop handle descended with a vicious whistle, aiming to crack my skull like an eggshell. I threw myself to the side, rolling across the linoleum as the heavy wooden pole smashed into the floor tiles where my head had been a fraction of a second ago. The impact sent a spiderweb of cracks through the vinyl, and dust motes danced in the fluorescent haze. "Stop!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "You're me?" We're the same person. The other Elias didn't pause. His face was a mask of exhausted rage, a perfect mirror of the expression I knew I was wearing. But there was something wrong with his eyes. They were too flat, too matte. They didn't reflect the store lights. "There's only budget for one clerk," he snarled, swinging the makeshift weapon again. "The shift ends when the roster is full, and you're redundant." I ducked under the swing, tackling him around the waist. It was like tackling a bag of wet cement. He was heavy, dense, and unnaturally cold. We crashed into the impulse buy rack near the register, sending packs of gum and lighters raining down around us. I punched him in the jaw, and pain exploded in my own face. It was a sympathetic link. Hitting him was hurting me. "Don't you get it?" I grunted, pinning his arms down. "If you kill me, you kill yourself. We're linked." The doppelganger laughed, a dry, rattling sound that smelled of ozone. "I'm not you, Elias. I'm the part of you that stays here. I'm the shift echo. Every night you work, you leave a piece of yourself behind. I am the accumulation of your boredom, your fear, and your wasted time. And I am hungry." He headbutted me. My nose crunched, warm blood gushing down my lip. I reeled back, blinded by tears and pain. He seized the advantage, shoving me off and looming over me, the mop handle raised like an executioner's axe. Resignation accepted, he whispered. I braced for the end. I closed my eyes, waiting for the dark. Beep, beep, beep. The sound wasn't safe this time. It was the handheld scanner attached to the belt I was wearing. It was chirping with an incoming communication request. The doppelganger froze. The scanner on his belt was silent. What is that? He hissed, looking down at my hip. I grabbed the scanner, my thumb mashing the talk button. It was a buddy system. The outline mentioned it, a network of night shift workers keeping tabs on each other. I had thought it was a myth, something Henderson had mumbled about, but right now, it was my only lifeline. This is Store 894. I gasped into the device. Code red. I have a duplicate. Requesting immediate assistance. Static washed over the line, followed by a voice. It was crisp female and sounded incredibly bored. Store 894. This is Store 202 in Tucson. We read you. You got an echo, honey. Nasty business. Did you drink the Diet Coke? Yes. I yelled, eyeing the doppelganger who was currently twitching, as if the voice on the radio was physically painful to him. Good. That grounded your consciousness. The echo is just residue. Ask him what his employee ID number is. What? I shouted, dodging a sluggish swipe from the mop. Just ask him. Echoes don't have IDs. They aren't on payroll. I rolled backward, putting the counter between us. Hey! I yelled at the thing wearing my face. What's your employee ID number? The doppelganger stopped dead. His mouth opened, working silently. He looked confused, his brow furrowing. I am Elias. I work the night shift. That's not a number. I screamed. What is your ID number? He began to vibrate. His form blurred at the edges, the colors of his uniform bleeding into the air. I don't exist on the spreadsheet. Store 202 says you're fired. I yelled, improvising. The effect was instantaneous. The doppelganger let out a wail that sounded like tearing metal. He dropped the mop handle. His skin began to flake away like ash in the wind. First his hands, then his torso, and finally his face dissolved into a pile of gray dust that settled on the floor. Clean that up before the morning rush, the woman from Tucson said over the scanner. And Elias, don't let the silence settle again. Keep the radio on Channel 4. We're all listening. Thank you. I breathed, collapsing against the counter. Who are you? Just another clerk trying to make rent, she said. We look out for our own. The corporation writes the checks, but we write the rules. Stay safe, Nevada. Dawn is coming. The line clicked dead. I was alone again. 4:45 a.m. I grabbed the dustpan and broom. I swept up the pile of gray ash that used to be my darker half. It felt heavy like lead filings. I dumped it into the trash, feeling a strange sense of loss mixed with relief. I had literally thrown away my own despair. But the night wasn't over. The store felt different now. The immediate threat of the monster was gone, but the atmosphere had thickened. The air was pressurized, heavy with the weight of the unspoken lore I had read about. This was the deep shift, the hour when the boundaries between the living and the dead are thinnest. I needed to stay busy. Mental fortitude was the key. If you stop moving, you start thinking. If you start thinking, you start noticing things you shouldn't. I decided to restock the cigarettes. It was a mindless task. Match the colors. Marlboro red to Marlboro red. Camel blue to camel blue. As I worked, I noticed something tucked behind the cartons of Newports. It was a small leather-bound notebook, much older than the logbook I had found earlier. I pulled it out. The cover was worn smooth by countless hands. I opened it. It was a collection of insider secrets, notes passed down from clerk to clerk over decades. Page 4. The customer you don't see. There are 3 types of nocturnal patrons. The drifters, harmless ghosts of travelers. The hungry ones like the mimic. And the auditors. The auditors look human. They dress in suits or uniforms. They don't want snacks. They want to buy things that aren't for sale. Time, youth, memories. Do not sell to them. If you complete a transaction with an auditor, you belong to the store forever. I slammed the book shut. The woman earlier, the one who bought the water with the monster money. She had been an auditor. She had tested me, and I had sold her the water. But water is for sale. I hadn't sold her anything abstract. I had only accepted strange currency. Had I failed, or had I passed by treating it as a normal transaction? The answer walked through the door at 5:15 a.m. The bell chimed. A man entered. He was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a trench coat that seemed to absorb the light around him. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face entirely. He didn't walk. He flowed, drifting toward the counter with a predatory grace. He placed a single item on the counter. It wasn't a product from the shelves. It was a golden pocket watch. The hands were spinning backward at a dizzying speed. "I wish to make a purchase," the man said. His voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. "We don't buy pawn items," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling of my hands. "Cash or credit only." "I am not selling the watch," the man said. "I am buying the time on it. I wish to purchase the last 5 hours of your life. In exchange," he reached into his coat and pulled out a stack of cash thick enough to choke a horse. "I offer you complete financial freedom. You can walk out that door right now. No debts, no night shift, just freedom." It was tempting. God, it was tempting. The last 5 hours had been hell. I wanted to erase them. I wanted the money. But I remembered the notebook. "Do not sell to them." "I can't sell you my time," I said, gripping the counter. "It's already spent." The man tilted his head. I could feel his gaze under the hat, burning into my retinas. "Time is fluid here, Elias. We can refund it. We can edit the tape. Just ring it up. Scan the watch." He pushed the golden watch toward me. The ticking sound was deafening, drowning out the hum of the ice machine. "No," I said firmly. "Are you sure?" The man leaned in. "The alternative is finishing the shift, and the sun is a long way off. The things that come out at 5:30 a.m., they make the charcoal mimic look like a puppy." "I'm sure," I said. "Get out of my store." The man chuckled. It was a cold, dry sound. He picked up the watch and the money. "Very well. You have passed the integrity check, but you have failed the intelligence check. You should have taken the deal." He turned and walked toward the door. As he reached the threshold, he stopped and looked back. For a second, the shadow under his hat lifted. He had no face, just a smooth surface of polished obsidian where features should be, reflecting the neon 7-Eleven sign. "Don't look at the sunrise directly," he warned. "It burns differently today." He vanished. I slumped against the register. 5:25 a.m. I was exhausted. My body ached from the fight with the echo. My mind was fraying at the edges. I needed a win. I needed to know that I wasn't just a rat in a maze. I checked the ice machine. Still humming. I checked aisle 3. The shadow was there, agitated, pacing back and forth, but staying within its boundaries. I checked the closet. Silent, but the store felt brittle. That was the only word for it. The walls seemed thin, as if the reality outside was pressing in, try to crush the little bubble of light that was a 7-Eleven. I decided to utilize the buddy system one more time. I keyed the scanner. "Store 202? This is Elias." "Still kicking, Nevada?" The voice came back. She sounded impressed. "Yeah, had a visit from an auditor. He wanted my time. Classic auditor move, she scoffed. Hey, listen, you're coming up on the witching hour's ugly cousin, the false dawn. Between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, the sky is going to get light. But it's not the sun. It's the store projecting a false exit. Don't go outside. Do not unlock the doors until you see the FedEx truck. The FedEx truck? Yeah, the delivery guy, Gary. He's the harbinger. He's the only real thing that comes at 6 a.m. If you see light, but no, Gary, it's a trap. You stay inside. You hold the line. Got it. Wait for Gary. And Elias? Yeah. Check your shoes. What? Check your shoes. Trust me. The line cut out. I looked down at my sneakers. They were covered in the fine, white dust. Not the salt. Not the gray ash from the Echo. It was bone dust. The floor tiles I had been walking on for the last hour, they weren't vinyl anymore. They were flat, polished squares of bone. I gagged, stumbling back. The store was shifting again, but subtly this time. It was trying to integrate itself into me. I looked up. The fluorescent lights were flickering in a pattern. Dash, dash, it. Dash, dash, it. Morse code. RUN. I can't run, I whispered to the lights. I have to wait for Gary. Then the power died. Total darkness. The hum of the ice machine cut out instantly. The silence slammed into the store like a physical blow. No! I whimpered. No, no, no. I fumbled for my phone to use the flashlight, but the battery was dead. I was blind, and in the darkness, I heard the sound of hundreds of items falling off the shelves at once, a cascade of inventory hitting the floor, and then a sound that chilled me to the marrow, the sound of the automatic doors sliding open, but the power was out. The doors shouldn't open, unless someone pried them open, or unless the thing entering didn't need electricity. Rule number 1. I recited in the dark, my voice trembling. The ice machine must never stop. But it had stopped. Rule number 2. Never look at the shadow. I couldn't see the shadow in the dark, which meant it could be anywhere. Rule number 3. Don't acknowledge the tapping. There was no tapping. There was breathing. Heavy, wet breathing coming from every aisle at once. The store was inhaling. I was in the belly of the beast, and the digestive acids were beginning to flow. I remembered the manual crank. I had to get to the back. I had to restart the machine manually in the dark. It was my only hope of reestablishing the barrier. I dropped to my hands and knees. The bone floor felt cold and slick. I began to crawl toward where I remembered the slushy station being. Marco. A voice whispered from the darkness to my left. It was a mimic's voice. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. Don't answer. Don't answer. Marco. The voice whispered from the right. It was the auditor's voice. I kept crawling. My hand brushed against something wet and sticky. Slurpee syrup or blood? I didn't stop to check. I felt the cold metal of the machine. I found the corner. I squeezed into the narrow gap behind it. Marco, whisper voice directly in my ear. It was my own voice. I grabbed the crank. I didn't answer. I put both hands on the cold iron and heaved. This wasn't just about keeping a machine running anymore. This was about jump-starting the heart of the world. If I failed, the 7-Eleven will become my tomb, and my Echo will be the next thing to greet a new hire. I cranked. The gears screamed in the darkness, a sound like a dying animal. 1 rotation, 2 rotations. A spark, a literal spark from the motor, illuminated the space for a microsecond. And in that flash of light, I saw that the store was full. Every aisle was packed shoulder to shoulder with silent, staring figures. The shadows, the echoes, the things from the closet. They were all watching me, waiting for the light to fail for good. I screamed and threw my weight into the crank. The spark from the motor died, plunging me back into the abyss. But the image of the crowded store was burned into my retinas. They were all there, a silent congregation of nightmares standing shoulder to shoulder in the aisles, facing the back of the store. Facing me, I hauled on the crank with desperate, manic strength. My muscles screamed, burning with lactic acid, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stopped, the silence would win. If I stopped, the breathing that filled the room would turn into chewing. Crank, groan, spark, another flash of light. They were closer. The silent army had taken a synchronized step forward in the dark. The tall shadow from aisle 3 was now towering over the Slurpee machine, its featureless face angled down toward my hiding spot. The charcoal mimic was crawling over the counter. The auditor stood by the door, checking his backward-spinning watch. "Come on," I roared, tears streaming down my face. "Start, you piece of junk. Start." I spun the handle so hard I felt something pop in my shoulder. Pain shot down my arm, hot and blinding, but I used the momentum to force one final, violent rotation. Wham! The motor caught. It didn't just hum this time. It roared, a thunderous, mechanical bellow that shook the floorboards and rattled the teeth in my skull. The icy light slammed on not red, not green, but a blinding pure white. The overhead lights surged back to life, exploding with intensity that turned the store into an overexposed photograph. A collective shriek tore through the air, a sound of 1,000 voices screaming in agony. I squeezed my eyes shut and clamped my hands over my ears, curling into a ball behind the vibrating machine. The light was searing, hot enough to feel on my skin. I could hear the sizzling of ozone, the sound of shadows being burned away by the artificial sun I had just jump-started. Then silence, not the heavy, oppressive silence of the void, but the empty, ringing silence of a room after a loud noise. The hum of the ice machine settled into its familiar, steady rhythm. The vibration against my back was comforting, like the purr of a giant metal cat. I stayed curled up for a long time, maybe minutes, maybe hours. Time is a tricky thing on the night shift. Eventually, the pain in my shoulder forced me to move. I uncurled slowly, my joints cracking, and peeked out from behind the machine. The store was empty. The silent army was gone. The bone tiles were back to dirty vinyl. The labels on the candy bars were English again. The Slurpee machine was churning bright red and blue syrup, not void nectar. I crawled out, clutching my injured shoulder. I looked at the clock. 5:58 a.m. I had held the line. I stumbled to the front counter, leaning heavily on it. I looked out the front window. The sky was a bruised purple, lightening to a pale, sickly yellow at the horizon. The false dawn. I remembered the warning from the Tucson Clerk. Don't go outside. Wait for Gary. I watched the light grow brighter. It looked real. It looked like the sun rising over the desert. The urge to run out the doors, to feel the warmth, to escape the fluorescent cage was overwhelming. My hand twitched toward the door lock. "It's a trick," I whispered, my voice raspy. "It's a trick." Outside, the world was too bright. The shadows stretched the wrong way, toward the light source, not away from it. The sagebrush didn't move in the wind. It was a painting, a backdrop. Then I saw it, a figure walking out of the desert light. It looked like my mother. She was smiling, waving at me, calling my name, though I couldn't hear her through the glass. "Elias, come home. The shift is over." Tears pricked my eyes. It was so convincing. She looked so warm. "You're not real," I sobbed. "Mom lives in Ohio. She doesn't walk out of the Nevada desert." The figure's smile widened, stretching too far, until the corners of her mouth touched her ears. She stopped waving and started clawing at her own face, peeling away the skin to reveal the charcoal sketch underneath. I turned my back on the window. I wouldn't look. I wouldn't give it the satisfaction. I stared at the clock. 5:59 a.m. Come on, Gary. Come on. And then I heard it. The most beautiful sound in the world. The rumble of a diesel engine. Not a ghostly whisper, but a clanking, sputtering, honest-to-God combustion engine. A beat-up FedEx truck rolled into the parking lot, crushing a tumbleweed under its tires. The headlights cut through the false dawn, dissolving the fake sunlight and revealing the true gray morning. The figure in the window vanished like smoke. The truck parked haphazardly across two spaces. The driver's side door opened and a man stepped out. He was wearing shorts despite the morning chill, holding a scanner in one hand and a thermos in the other. He looked annoyed, tired, and completely, wonderfully mundane. Gary. He walked up to the glass doors and knocked. Thud, thud, a solid, human knock. I sprinted to the door. I fumbled with the locks, my shaking fingers barely working. I threw the bolt, and the door slid open. The air that hit me was cold and smelled of gasoline and dust. Real air. Morning, Chief, Gary grunted, walking past me without a glance. Got a delivery for Henderson. Where's the manifest? I stared at him. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to kiss his boots. Gary, I croaked. You're real. Gary paused, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. He saw the blood on my face, the salt on my uniform, the wet pant legs. He didn't look surprised. He just looked sympathetic. Rough night, he asked. You have no idea. I laughed, a hysterical edge to my voice. I have some idea, Gary said, placing a package on the counter. Store 894 is a temperamental beast. You made it to the truck, though most don't make it to the truck on their first night. He scanned the barcode on the package. Beep. The sound was sharp, digital, and real. Sign here, he said, holding out the pad. I signed. My signature was shaky, a jagged scrawl. All right, Gary said, tucking the pad away. Sun's up, kid. The rules reset at 6 a.m. You're safe. He walked back out to his truck, climbed in, and drove off, leaving a cloud of exhaust in his wake. As the truck disappeared, the first rays of the true sun crested the mountains. Golden light flooded the store, chasing away the last of the shadows in the corners. The ice machine's hum seemed to quiet down, becoming just a normal motor again. The tapping in the closet was gone. Aisle 3 was just chips and jerky. I was safe, but I wasn't the same. I walked to the bathroom to clean up. I looked in the mirror. My face was bruised, my lips split, but it was my eyes that were different. They looked older. They held the 1,000-yard stare of a soldier who has seen the trenches. I washed the blood off my face. I changed my shirt. I mopped the floor one last time, erasing the footprints of the night. At 6:45 a.m., the morning shift clerk, a teenager named Kyle, walked in. He had headphones around his neck and a skateboard under his arm. He looked so young, so innocent. Hey, man, Kyle said, tossing his bag behind the counter. How was it? Boring night? I looked at him. I looked at the ice machine. I looked at the closet door. Yeah, I said softly. Pretty quiet. I grabbed my keys. I walked to the door. I paused, my hand on the frame. Kyle, I said. Yeah. He was already scrolling on his phone. Keep the ice machine running. If it stops, fix it. Fast. Kyle chuckled. Sure thing, boss. Weirdo. I walked out into the parking lot. The sun was warm on my skin. I got into my car, my beat-up Honda Civic, and started the engine. It turned over on the first try. I drove onto the highway, putting the 7-Eleven in my rear-view mirror. As I drove, I saw the desert stretching out around me. It didn't look empty anymore. I saw shapes in the heat haze. I heard whispers in wind. The night shift experiences don't stay in the store. They bleed into the day. The normalcy returns, but it's a veneer, a thin coat of paint over a rotting wall. I turn on the radio. Static. Then a voice. Store 894, this is store 202. Good shift, Elias. Get some sleep. You're on the roster for tomorrow. I turn off the radio. I'm a night shift clerk at 7-Eleven in Nevada. The backroom rules are bizarre. I survived my first shift. I survived the ice machine, the shadow, and the echo. But as I drive home, I can't shake the feeling of the bone dust on my shoes. And I know, with a terrifying certainty, that when the sun goes down tonight, I'll go back. Not because I need the money, but because the store knows my name now. And you don't quit the graveyard shift. The graveyard shift quits you.